Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Doctor is In podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nadia Sabeh, president and founder of Dr. Greenhouse. Today's interview is part of our special series, What Plants Crave, from science, technology, engineering, and math, and all of the above, where I'm interviewing equipment providers, engineers, and design professionals about the unique technological and building needs for growing crops indoors and in greenhouses. My guest today is Brian Anderson, co-founder and CEO of Anderson Porter Design, an architecture firm based out of Boston that has carved out a very special niche for cannabis facility design. If you don't recognize Brian's name, you've probably seen him around at a conference or event with his signature strawberry blonde beard and fedora hat. Brian's firm has designed many cannabis retail stores, cultivation operations, and manufacturing facilities all over the country, bringing a systematic approach to the planning and design process that I find is often missing from this industry. Brian is passionate about environmentally responsible building design and has worked with such organizations as the NCIA, the Resource Innovation Institute, and even ASTM to develop data-driven standards and best practices that help make cannabis businesses more profitable and honestly, the industry more successful and sustainable overall. I think we share that, definitely that value together. Brian, it's so great to have you on the What Plants Crave podcast. I'm super excited to talk to you about architectural design and planning for the cannabis industry and other CEA facilities. So welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Nadia. Very happy to be here.
So let's start with, how did you first get interested or involved in cannabis facility design?
Do you know the term luck is the intersection of preparedness and opportunity?
Yes.
So I had a career as an architect for 20 years prior to meeting my first would-be cannabis customer. And it was that practice, it was that experience as a general practitioner in architecture that brought me. So I started my career doing retail stores across Canada for Levi Strauss and other international brands. So I knew retail. I'm in Eastern Massachusetts, right? Boston, Cambridge area. Every suburban office park is filled with medical device manufacturing or some sort of high tech, because Harvard, MIT, right? They just spew out these, like in the Bay Area, right? Just like all of those tech companies, very similar here in this environment. And so I did my fair share of clean rooms, ISO 7, ISO 8 clean rooms, positive pressure, negative pressure. My customers routinely wear hairnets and beard nets and put on booties, swing their feet from the dirty side, from the clean side to the dirty side. So GMP was a familiar practice for me, not a new acronym that I needed to learn. We had security in our background. We worked with the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston during 9/11. So, you can imagine one national federal organization who had a deep passion for security post 9/11. And we were.
I love that there was a siren in the background right now.
Yeah, there's sirens in the background.
Perfect timing, on cue.
We had security, we had GMP, we had retail. Plant science I learned from Dr. Nadia Sabeh, attending your seminar in Boston. What was that, 2018 maybe?
2019, I think.
2019?
Yeah.
But I learned it as well from phenomenal. So 2014, we got interviewed and, like many architects are, put on a short list and interviewed and came away the winning firm. And I haven't looked back. I found my people. It reinvigorated my practice of architecture. It reinvigorated my passion. And there's just so many amazing stories of how cannabis changes people's lives and how I, as an architect, find deep professional satisfaction in bringing information to customers that really need it, right? I'm not just a commodity. People, don't, right? Architects in many, many, many industries are a commodity. You can find 15 that do the same thing.
Yeah.
And you just select on price. So we found an opportunity here where people have, never even worked with an architect before, don't know what the profession is. A lot of legacy folks have put their life and their passion into this plant, and yet, didn't get an MBA, didn't go out and get a, learn about botany, didn't have a 4-year degree in horticulture, right? So they bring that knowledge together. We feel proud to be able to support that knowledge. And through standards, you mentioned ASTM and,
Yeah.
NCIA, stuff that Derek is doing with RII, that's Derek Smith with Resource Innovation Institute, best practices, to support the legacy folks and repeat customers. So folks who have been out there and worked already hard, maybe with a facility, and are now looking either to merge and acquire or to grow and expand, and have learned the hard way, right? What didn't work. That's sort of what gets me up in the morning.
I
It's
love
100%.
that. And that's the story of you creating this niche in an industry that, like you were saying, hasn't necessarily had to hire an architect or include and incorporate sound architectural design, or even do it in a way that complies with building codes, right? And
Right.
now we're in here in California, now we're dealing with energy codes, and I
Yes.
know there's energy regulations in other places as well, but it's a specialty that you and I bring to this industry, because the same is true, right? Contractors, mechanical engineers, sort of a dime a dozen, but finding someone, an architect like yourself or an engineer like us, who really takes the time to understand what growers are trying to accomplish and what plants need from our designs is more unique and hard to come by. On that note, I want to ask you, I just want to start really basic.
Yeah.
Why do cannabis projects or developers or growers or whatever, why do they need you? Why do they need an architect in the first place?
Good question, right? So first of all, one reason is the building code. So these are factories. These are moderate hazard factories by definition. A grow facility is a factory moderate hazard. That's the building classification from the ICC, the International Code Conference. That's the state level, right? And municipal level. There's a local building inspector, and they're concerned with life safety, not plant safety. So the architect, and so many architects practice in cannabis without knowing a thing about the plant, right? I will make sure that you have the right exit doors. I'll make sure they're the right width. I'll make sure that the place won't burn. We'll get an engineer. We'll do sprinklers. Everything else, that's on you. Like, don't talk to me. It's just like, plugging the ears and going, blah, 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 right? So there's lots of opportunity to find very competent, good architects in that space. However, there's so many more aspects that architecture affects in plant health and plant growth. So happy plants is a good business, right? And airflow and all of those pieces have to do with air sealing in tight environments. So that's the room design. So what is a properly built grow room? Many architects just will do the shell for the customer and not worry about the room inside. Well, so that room and its tightness is fundamental to air control, air movement, proper VPD, RH, maintaining all of your interior set points are really hard to do if you're growing in a plastic tent, right? So you don't grow in plastic tents. You grow or in a greenhouse. You want to make sure that the environmental controls can be maintained. Big differences between greenhouse and warehouse grows. So architects affect not only the superstructure, the piece that the local and state building authorities have jurisdiction over, but if you find an architect who knows plant health and who understands the interaction between building systems and process systems and the flow of operations, then you can improve the business by shortening the number of steps that a crew have to go through. Well, that's planning and organization, and that's an architect's world. Selection of materials, so specifiers. Architects are specifiers for building materials. So if you know that you're using certain chemicals and you don't want them to peel your floor finishes up, then we want to specify the right floor finishes the first time. Or let's talk about C1D1 if you're extracting, right? What areas, in fact, are C1D1? Is it a HAL booth? Well, they went out of business, so maybe it's a Podtronics booth, right? Are there Lab Conco booths? How do you coordinate the power needed for that, right? So architects typically in industry coordinate the work of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing trades. So we bundle that. We provide coordination. We're not engineers. We're not purporting to be, but we help to facilitate the communication of the process systems, horticulture or manufacturing, and not necessarily translate that. I mean, we have engineers now who, like yourself, are completely immersed in this. We don't tend to work with novice engineers either, right? Or new engineers to this industry. So we often are a quarterback in coordinating room design and environment and overall facility and flow of that facility. We often quarterback with also some rather mundane things like making sure that the security vendor is layered in and that the doors have the right security hardware on them. And then, for example, we work with equipment suppliers who will buy and warehouse and deliver just-in-time delivery, if you're familiar with that term, to have things delivered so they don't get driven over by forklifts mistakenly and forgotten to be opened up. And right, we're coordinators of all those various subtrades, and that's in industry, in hospital design, and in secondary schools and university design buildings. That's the role of the architect, is that sort of quarterback amongst all host of specialty tradespeople, specialty design people. So that's where we thrive, because that was our experience prior to coming to cannabis, and that saves customers time and money ultimately.
Well, it helps us too, as one of the trades, right? As one of the team members, one of the engineers working for the client. And I would say from my own experience, I'm really glad you talked about coordination and sort of the project management side of these projects, because I came from previously, before starting Dr. Greenhouse, I was working as a mechanical engineer for 7 years on, commercial institutional projects. And I learned that the architect is sort of the go-to, right? Like they're the one who coordinates the calls, who coordinates the team, who coordinates the drawings, who coordinates the building department, who even communicates to the client. I will say one thing that I like about my position now is that I have a direct connection and line of communication with the client. The architect isn't in my way anymore. But and I only say that, and I don't mean that in a necessarily negative to architects. It's just that architects can't always they don't always understand or have the ability to convey exactly what we're trying to do. And so sometimes it can just expedite that process and help us, right? Just having a direct line to talk directly to the client, or the grower in this case, about what we're trying to do.
So I'll give you an example of that. I'll give you an example of that. So there's a thing in AEC industries called programming. And programming is often a nebulous thing. Like maybe some developers will hire specialty teams just to do programming. And then once the program has been developed, that developer will go out and bid the job to architects and engineers, et cetera. We, Anderson Porter Design, help our engineers every time we work with an engineering team by bringing them in, helping to form the questionnaire. How do we pull from this customer exactly what we as a team need to know? So we're collaborative in that approach. We work with Jim Megerson, we work with you, we work with great engineers who know the plant to develop a set of questions to the customer to say, what's your grow methodology? How do you grow? Are you single tier? Are you 2-tier? Are you HPS? Are you LED? Are you growing in coco coir? Are you growing in organic living soils? All of these things do you like, 1 plant per square foot? Do you want 9 square feet per plant? What are you doing? Those questions, when written down, form what's called the conditions of satisfaction, or the basis of design. There's a number of different terms. Right? We've talked about this before. Once you develop that and write it down, we then, all as these various design professionals, we have one single point. If it's going to change, we acknowledge, the customer says, no, we're going to change that. We've all been through it, but at least we have a paper trail. We have a way to say, okay, this is what we're doing. And now from an engineering perspective, you can help design, understand that genetic strain, what they're growing, what the transpiration rate is, what the PPFD needs to be, what the daily light index needs to be. Are they growing in, 12 on, 12 off? with 2 rooms, or are they growing both rooms on for 12 hours and both off? All of those affect energy consumption, and they affect building design. And so programming is one of those ways in which, I mean, you said it, yes, architects can often be in the way of all of the various specialty disciplines if they're not collaborative and if there's no established program. So we help to establish that program, because programming in cannabis is completely unheard of, let alone architects.
Tell me about it. I mean, it's amazing that you guys do that. I mean, why do you do that and others don't? I don't know that you can speak to why others don't, but I mean, why are you so unique in this industry?
I care.
Fair enough.
I care about my customers. I really do. There is nobody I can't work with. I would love to work with everybody, but it is expensive.
Yeah.
And so to hire an architect fundamentally is expensive. And that weeds out a lot of legacy growers who are not funded. You know, the world of today, and it's been the same, right? You can't get funding from a bank. And so how do we make this work? Different states are intervening with legislation. For state of New York, in their social equity program. Alabama just announced their licenses. I don't know if you're following that. There's 9 licenses now live in Alabama as of 2 days ago. We're on one of those teams. Yay.
Yay.
And they went to social equity applicant, the 4 vertical licenses, the 25% of the cannabis cultivation licenses. So
nice.
States intervene to help, but fundamentally it's still expensive. All right, so it's not easy as an architect. It is not easy. I can make a lot more money working in, just straight up retail, quick serve, doing McDonald's restaurants, or just working with universities.
The cookie cutters.
That stuff pays much better than cannabis does. So why do we do this? Because I said it earlier, I feel good about providing services that people don't otherwise have access to. And it's my burden to prove the value proposition. If I can't prove the value proposition, no one's going to spend the money.
Yeah.
But I have proven the value proposition to enough customers that I'm building some momentum. And by value proposition, I mean, is it worth spending this kind of money, right?
Yeah.
Talk to plenty of operators who have spent twice what I would ever charge, 3 times what I would ever charge in mistakes. And so I'm selling something that's invisible. That's always been the burden of architects. We sell the invisible.
Yeah.
It isn't real until we make it, and we have to pretend what it's going to be and what it's going to cost to justify. Right? So there's some craft in there, and it's difficult, but we've done it enough times now that we've been to the end zone, and we can effectively talk to our customers about how to avoid the falling boulders, how do you do that? And yeah, it's not cheap, it's expensive, but so are engineers, and so are, hort process engineers and fire protection engineers and the whole list of civil engineers and land use attorneys, right? These are the costs of doing business. And the industry's growing up. The industry's coming along, right? It's the consumer products goods industry, ultimately. This is all about consumer product goods and consumer demand. We're just, in many states, we're out ahead of that because no one's done the polling. No one's asked people how much THC do you want in your pre-roll. No, people don't know. They just buy 30% because
exactly. It's more. More is better.
More. So until we get those kinds of data, about consumer product goods, what type of drink do you like? Is it infused soda water? Is it infused juices? How much CBD? How much THC? Once we start to collect that was in MJ Biz Daily actually yesterday.
I saw that. Yeah.
It says, gee, could businesses be better if they were talking to their customers? Holy shit.
Are you serious?
Any international retailer, it's all about customer polling. They will rebuild stores. Most retailers internationally will rebuild a store. They'll tear it down and rebuild it just to put in a different kiosk system to change their prototypes every 5 years. They'll tear their stores down and build them anew. That's the consumer products good industry, right? Cannabis is yet to achieve that status and that maturity.
Right.
But we're on the way.
And I didn't want to disparage working with architects, because really what I wanted to say is that I enjoy working with architects such as yourself who are involved in the design, who set up regular meetings, who are facilitating the communication and coordination with the entire team, and are good communicators with the client as well, in terms of why we're doing what we're doing and why, building codes are important, and having a building permit is, the legal way to go. And even on those building materials, I know that we have some ideas in terms of building materials for our own systems, right? A lot of metal and fabric that we are considering on the HVAC side. And I know that, architects are always curious to hear our thoughts on that. The good architects are. Why stainless steel and not galvanized steel?
Or why glass? Why Lexan and not glass?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
in Michigan, the Bureau of Fire Safety has a lot to say about that.
Mm,
And if you designate it wrong and can't talk to the
yeah,
fire marshal, suddenly your permit's being held up for 3, 4, 5 months. You
yeah,
don't know why.
yeah. You listed off a great litany of basis of design data
Conditions of
points, right? Yeah,
satisfaction. Yep. Yep.
yeah, conditions of satisfaction. When you first got into this industry, I imagine you didn't have that list ready to go. How did you learn what was important to growers to now be able to ask those questions? Like what was your learning curve like?
Yeah. So one thing that I came to about 15 years ago, so maybe 10 years prior to coming to cannabis, or 6 years prior to coming to cannabis, been doing this 10 years now, was the Lean Construction Institute. So think of the Toyota way, think of lean manufacturing, just in time, applying that to the AE and C industry. So I had spent quite a bit of my career with LCI, the Lean Construction Institute, looking at how to improve systems. And one of the things is always to focus on the customer. What does the customer need? What does the customer want? And that is fundamentally what programming is about, right? Learn it, ask it, write it down. That becomes the basis of design. So again, opportunity, right? And luck. I had these things in my tool belt where I knew to ask and write down. Even if I don't know the answer, right? I'm going to build a good team around me. I'm going to ask the right questions. So then the process was one of the tools on my belt. Then it was meeting folks like meeting folks like Mike Zartarian, meeting folks like Tom Halfley, meeting folks like Jim Megerson, meeting folks who were hort process engineers, systems engineers, had grown up growing, right? Many have a degree in hort and botany, but know also electrical engineering. There's been some really phenomenal folks from whom I've learned. And so I learned things about hort narratives, right? How does one narrative? Brian Staffa is starting to push out really interesting information on his LinkedIn page. I learned from folks who have gone before me, and then I layer that into this process, right? If there's a process that I know that works, a proven process that works in any industry, I can now layer in the right professionals, and I can help guide that and manage that in a way that it seems mysterious, but it can actually save tons of money with really fundamentally simple things that I do prior to becoming a cannabis architect, just things that architects do. So for example, procurement. If I know that switchgear and mechanical systems are going to be the longest lead items, right? Up to a year. This past, we just did a job in Mississippi, and we were getting reports back of 60 months for switchgear. Okay, well, how do you solve that problem, right? 60 months to get switchgear, or 42 weeks. No, not months, weeks. So a year.
Okay, I was
So
like 5 years. Oh
no,
my
sorry.
God.
Weeks, not, yes, 60 weeks or 40 weeks for some of the mechanical equipment. What I knew how to do already was to bring in the right people, right? You've heard of design assist, right? So you bring in the actual trades and you talk about it. You say, look, it's not going to save us any money to bid this out to 3 different vendors. Let's pick the right vendor and let's make them part of the team. But that's something I learned how to do prior to coming to cannabis. And I simply see the pattern rehappening, which is, okay, we have extreme procurement problems in certain areas. Let's make that a design assist piece, because there's no win to the owner to wait until the drawings are all done to go out to bid on that trade. It just doesn't make any sense. So, or you base it on kilowatt hours. What is the cost per kilowatt hour of energy in your particular area, or what's the climate zone? Okay, that's going to help shape what the right set of vendors are going to be, right, on that system. Yes, there's an ideal, but that ideal might not work in the time frame that the customer has, right? So we have to adapt. And those are things that I learned how to do in other industries. Is how to bop and weave and adapt.
I have two questions I want to ask you, and I don't know which direction to go. Let's start with this. Can you define, because these terminologies are pretty common in AEC, architecture, engineering, construction, for our friends who don't know that acronym. But it's, like you were saying, like we were talking about, like this architecture thing and engineering thing is kind of new to the industry, but we
Yep.
use these terms. Some of us use these terms. And what do they mean? Design assist,
Yeah.
design build, and
Yep.
design bid build. What
Oh,
what is that?
I've
And what are
lost.
the maybe
Yeah.
the pros and cons between those? And which do you see the most often in
So full
cannabis?
disclosure, I've lost a customer because they thought I was being smug using terms that they didn't understand.
See,
And that
there we
hurt.
go. Yeah, yeah.
That hurt. That hurt. They thought I was, doing some kind of 3-card Monte with with the cups and the bean on the table on the side of 42nd Street. And no, these are, yes. So forgive me. So design assist. Design assist is where you will bring we call them trade partners, right? Mechanical installer, not a mechanical engineer, but mechanical installer or sales rep for a particular piece of equipment. So I learned this in high-rise construction. If we're going to do a building that's 90% glass exterior, then why do we wait to the end of the job to talk to the glass company, right? That is one of the major systems in the building. And if it can be, the customer shouldn't have to pay for that over and over and over again, which means that typically architects will draw the glazing system of a high rise without ever talking to the installer. And then they'll hand it out with shop drawings. So shop drawings are when the installer interprets the design drawings and they adapt them to their own technologies. So you could imagine that in mechanical systems. You can imagine that in glazing systems for buildings. And if you have a well-meaning but not necessarily 100% technical architect who has a great design vision, they're going to draw this incredible looking building that no one quite yet knows how to build. And so then the engineer will take it, and and the contractor will take the drawings, and they'll start to value engineer it, and they'll start to redraw it. That's the second time now the customer's paid for it to be redrawn. And then they'll hand it off to what we call a trade partner, like a glazing installer, right? There's massive glazing installers in every big city. And they'll draw it a third time. And that cost of drawing that system will be absorbed again in the cost of installing it. So the customer's paid for it 3 times. So one of the brilliance, when you have one of the why design assist is really a great system is when you have a tight schedule, when you cannot wait, right? And all of us in cannabis know that that's pretty much every job. And you have a major system in the building, like the mechanical system, or let's just stick with mechanical system, right? And you're saying, okay, should this be primarily air system with ductwork, or should this be a chilled water system with piping, right? And so one of the initial questions might be, okay, what's the cost of those trades? Is ductwork cheaper than pipe fitters, right? What's the long-term ROI on this system versus that system? And in many cases, we find the right answer. Sometimes it's direct exchange, electrical fired direct exchange, rooftop units. And if the lead times are very long, we say, okay, who are we going to bring in? Is it going to be Zero Cool? Is it Rex Mustaine from Zero Cool? Is it Rupp Air? Is it our friend at Desert Air? And if you bring them into the design table, you find all kinds of opportunities that you never knew existed because they're the manufacturer of that piece of equipment, and they can lend. So how did Brian Anderson learn about this industry? Through not only the engineers and the owners, but also the tradespeople who need to install these things. And they look at me crazy, like, you wanted me to do that? Like, how about I do it this way? It's like, oh, wow, that's brilliant. I never would have thought of that. And now suddenly we saved time. We save time in construction, and we save time that the owner has to pay for ultimately in the drawings, right? So design assist, that's a long-winded answer, but that's design assist, where you bring tradespeople, the trade partners in early.
Okay.
Design build I'm doing this in New York now. New York has procured all of their construction services for the social equity program for the retail stores in the state of New York. Design build is the methodology is the procurement method, how they're getting these jobs done. Design build jobs are led by the contractor and the architect as a pair. And typically, classically, it's a single price. It's like a turnkey. Think of turnkey. If somebody wants a facility built turnkey, that's typically design build. The contractor and the architect and the engineers are all a package. It's not like you select each one individually. You'll write down your program and that's what they'll build. And they'll give you one price and they'll do it for that price. The United States government procures all of its services design build.
Interesting.
That's often why things suck too at the US government when they because they bought it design build. And that team, they didn't know what to price. They didn't know what their risk was.
Right.
And so the government pushes all the risk onto the design build contractor. Well, how do you handle risk? You raise your price.
Yep.
Okay. So maybe design build's not the right system for cannabis, right? Design bid build is where you hire an architect and you produce the drawings and you push them out to bid, and engineers, architects and engineers, you hire designers who design it, and then you bid. You send the drawings on the street is the sort of colloquialism. Put the drawings on the street. And then you get pricing back and you select the price, or you redesign because the prices are all too high. And then you build. So design, bid, build. Another way that I learned that isn't either one of those two is through the Lean Construction Institute. Integrated project delivery is another method. It's a hybrid of those two.
Yeah.
And that's where design assist comes from. It comes from my work through through thinking lean and saying, well, there's some advantages in design build where the architect, the engineer, and the builder are all partners. But there's some advantages to open book where you would offer the customer the benefit of going to bid, let's say painting. Okay, who cares about the painting number, right? It's right. Let's get 3 bids on painting and let's pass that through to the customer because we don't care. If we can get it cheaper, if we can save 10 grand on the painting number, let's save 10 grand, right? You can't go 15% over on every line item. You only want to go 15% over, right? So
yeah.
a lot of this podcast is really becoming technical. I hope your listeners are enjoying
that.
This
Was the plan.
Inside baseball. This is inside baseball and how the process of procuring buildings works and how much it matters for the developer, right? The cannabis entity who's playing developer, looking at this scary task of building a $16 million facility. And how do you know that you're not getting fleeced? How do you know you're not getting hosed?
Right.
The term cannabis tax, I don't see it. I think that was an invention, a term coined when, we were in the sort of primordial amoeba state, climbing out of the water and learning to walk as the legacy industry coming into the light of day, thought that everything was so damned expensive. And this must be the cannabis tax. Now, admittedly, there's times when landlords have jacked their prices when they learned what the entity was going to do. That blatantly is the cannabis tax. I'm sure there have been mechanical contractors who have slapped a green marijuana leaf
for
on
sure.
and charged a little bit more for it. So I'm not denying there's such a thing as a cannabis tax, but truly in professional services, right? If you investigate what your engineer is charging and how much time they're spending, you're getting what you pay for.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear these terms kind of thrown around by some of my clients. Not every client, knows these terminologies, but I would say design build is the term that I hear the most frequent. And the reason people say that they want design build is because what they've heard about it, or the positive that they hear, is that they have one person to point the finger at.
One throat joke.
Exactly. So when everything, the shit hits the fan, that's who they're going to go after. But that to me is such a pessimistic point of view. Like, you're already thinking about the system failing, and you want to be able to sue or point your finger at that company or that organization. Like, that sucks, right? And And definitely, I would say the more savvy clients that we work with are more on the design build. They come from construction, they come
Yep.
from development. They've been part of like the building process before, and they see the value of having specialty engineers and consultants and design professionals, and then bid that out. And we kind of live in a space in between all of that a lot of times, because a lot of times we're hired to do calculations, pick very specific equipment for,
Yep.
say, the grow rooms, but we don't need to touch office spaces and admin. I mean, we can definitely design that, and we do design that, but that's not necessarily, the value that you're getting from us, our value proposition.
Right.
And so, sometimes our clients work with a design bid contractor, and then it comes to light like, oh, but Dr. Greenhouse is specifying all the HVAC equipment. That means we can't do what we normally do. And those contractors don't always like that, right? Because then they can't make a buck on cheap HVAC equipment. And I'm
That's
sure that's true for all sorts of trades. That's not just a
that's true.
mechanical thing. It's just that we have that specialization. And usually our clients are like, well, whatever, we're going to trust what Dr. Greenhouse has been doing, right? We've been working with them for 6
Right.
months. So go make your money on the glazing system or the
Yeah.
paint, right? Or something else.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's all about, so to answer that, or to follow up on that, it's about risk management, right? As professionals,
Yeah. Yeah.
the reason you pay an engineer money is so that that engineer takes on risk off of your plate and
Mm-hmm.
puts it onto hers. That is fundamentally the exchange of money for risk. Same reason people hire an architect. You pay me money so that I take risk off of your plate and I take liability for that. Builder, same thing. So if the amount of risk allocated to the professional is proper, balances to the fee. Okay,
Yeah.
these are things that the owner now, like, think of the 100 million things a developer has to do. Suddenly they've got to build their team, they've got to hire staff, they've got to think of SOPs. Many of my customers need a whole nother trade, which is called OPM, Owner's Project Manager.
Yeah.
Many folks take on the task of developing a new asset, building out real estate, and their bandwidth runs thin. Many times their C-suite is small and they haven't hired their key staff yet. And so one group, again, if they have cannabis experience, it's a super strong addition to the team, which is an OPM, somebody from the owner's side as a project manager who can sit in those OAC meetings. Again, some terminology: owner, architect, contractor. We have those meetings every week. Do you
Totally
have to
agree.
be in every one of those meetings? Sometimes that is just mind numbing for an owner who's got 1,000 other things to do.
Yep.
I would have folks think about that. Now, we do project and program management as part of our service, but on a small fraction of the jobs that we do. It consumes a lot of our bandwidth. So we're happy when either the owner comes forward with project management experience,
Mm-hmm.
or they bring a owner's project manager in as part of their team. And
Yep.
that helps enormously.
A 100% agree. Because also then we're more transparent in what we're doing, right? Because then one, we have these regular meetings, so we're always making progress and we always have these milestones. That's always great. But also then the owner, that owner's representative, that owner's project manager knows what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And they understand where the challenges come up, or they understand what the progresses we're making, or they understand that we're missing a team member and need to bring them on, or like whatever it is. And then they can convey that to the owner, whoever is investing in that facility, to help them understand why the timeline is lagging, why we're not making the progress, or why the cost is going to increase over here, why they need to change the design over there. And it just smooths the entire process overall. 100% agree with what you said.
Yep.
Yeah.
Integrated project delivery, IPD, integrated project
Mm-hmm.
delivery, I said earlier, was this hybrid between design build and design bid build. And in well-oiled, well-functioning integrated project delivery jobs, there is no owner's project manager. And that is because the owner has identified a core team member who is senior enough in the ownership group to have authority, and have the power of the check. If that person
Yeah.
can commit the time, and the architect commits the time to be, which we always do every meeting, and the contractor commits the time and the resources to be in every OAC meeting every week, that is a core team. And that team, if well represented and supported with ownership, it functions ideally. It just as well as having an OPM, an owner's project manager, play that role.
Yeah.
Because when the ownership can play that role and they have the power of the checkbook and they have the decision-making power, we can make decisions rapidly.
Quick. Yeah.
Rapidly.
Yeah.
And speed to market is key.
Okay, so now I want to ask the line of questions I was thinking of before we went on project delivery methodologies. Yeah. But I'm glad we went into that technical side, because defining those terms, I think, is really important for everyone listening when we throw those out there, or when you, the client, the owner, are trying to decide which strategy or which approach you're going to take to develop your project. We're all on the same page in terms of that terminology. So the other question I wanted to ask you, I mean, all this experience you had before cannabis and now you're in cannabis, what strikes you as super unique and different about cannabis? Like, and also, you've talked a little bit about what you brought from your previous experience to cannabis, but what really surprised you about the cannabis industry that you weren't expecting?
First off, figuring out, adjusting my radar, right?
Okay.
Who's a criminal and who's not?
Oh, interesting.
Oh yeah. So the term silos, right? And so if my customer puts me in a silo and doesn't invite me to talk to the other person over there, and the other person over there says no, then I have a lower interest of getting involved with that customer. Doesn't mean that they're a criminal. It just means that is behavior that was learned in the legacy market, right? You keep each group in a silo, because the more any one person knows about your business, the more likely you are to fail or get called out by the cops. And so that was something that I needed to learn early. I forced to learn that early.
Interesting.
I say criminal, I mean, that's salacious. We were all criminals when we grew in the legacy market, right? So
that's true. Yeah.
I shouldn't actually use the term, but it gets the point across, is that we need to break those barriers and we need to break down silos. So that was something interesting to me. The other was sort of learning to speak stoner, right? So, right, early in 2014, my God, everybody brought somebody from California or Humboldt, California, or from Colorado, as their grow consultants, right? It was like, oh, what's your room design? They look around, wow, I could grow in this room right here. It's like, okay. I'm gonna grow in this room. It's
I mean, you could, but should you?
Right? So I guess I had this unique, what really surprised me and captured my attention was that sort of, I'm working with folks who have no idea what I do and don't have preconceived ideas about what I do. And it's my job to win or lose. I think if I lose this customer, it's because I didn't talk at their language. I didn't speak their language. That's what I mean. I learned to speak stoner, right? I had to learn to speak the language of my customer and really embrace them. Show them that I'm not here to displace them. I'm not here as an architect to this isn't like the robot taking over our jobs. This is like, it's not like saying, oh, if your development team hires an architect, you don't need the legacy grower anymore. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that maybe we can definitely provide education through standards and through best practices for every legacy grower out there, right? And it's hard, right? To say, well, I always grow on wooden benches. Well, wood is a mold host, right? So maybe we don't want to do that. Oh, well, those Connolly benches or those GGS benches is really expensive, right? Right. And you can sort of see this thought process happening of, oh, if I don't grow on the floor, maybe, and because you're in production now and you've got staff and you don't want people to be out with back injuries, let's grow on a table, right? Not just on the floor. And let's not
Yeah.
use wood. And
Yeah.
oh, let's not use drywall and wood studs to build the room.
A lot of
Right?
growers learn that one the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you give an example of a good facility design and a bad facility design? Like maybe just layout even, or you pick which element.
So facility design. So let's talk, I don't know. I mean, greenhouse, indoor
Let's just talk
grow.
indoor
Indoor,
cannabis facility. And you have some flower rooms and some bedrooms and mother rooms and some front of house areas and dry room and, staging areas. Like, what to you, like, if you looked at somebody else's plan, what to
yeah,
you would be like, oh, this is a good layout or this is a good design
yeah.
versus, oh my God, like, I hope that, they need to work on this a little bit.
There are some real telltales. I'll tell you right up front. There are some obvious telltales. One of them is corridor width. If
Yes.
I see somebody with 6 foot, 6.5 foot corridors where the doors on one side hit the doors coming out the other side, I know they're not open at the same time, but the architect always has to draw them open. And if I see those doors hitting, I can tell you that they've probably overestimated the amount of room size for canopy reasons and underestimated the non-productive areas, i.e. corridors. Oh, you don't make money on the corridor. We make money on the grow room. So let's build the grow room as big as we can. That's one reason, one flag that goes up. Another is vertical racking that doesn't have any clearance between the racks and the walls. As though no one needs to walk down between the rack and the wall. You never need to clean this room. No, you do. And that's another telltale. All of these lead to the same sort of fundamental, which is an overestimation of canopy and an underestimation of the human worker that needs to do work in these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear over and over from really talented growers working in crappy facilities that they lose staff all the time. They can't keep staff if there's not enough space to do work. So I start looking for, oh, did they, at one point, were they able to widen the hallway? And there's your niche for all your carts, right? So they're not just sitting in the middle of the hallway when you walk down. Oh, there's a niche on the side and all the carts go in there. Do they have storage? So there's little
Yes.
telltales that I start to look for. One that I learned, from hort process engineers is the term horticulture wet bench. It's just a room with a 3-bin sink and some stainless steel tables. It's like a potting room,
Yeah. The
essentially.
head house, basically, like a
Well,
greenhouse would be.
yeah, it's the greenhouse
It's a
head house, but
stage. I call it the staging area. Yeah.
staging area, perfect, right? And maybe it's got a floor sink so you can actually wash big things. Just
Mm-hmm.
yeah, shit flies everywhere, so it's got 4 walls and a door, so it doesn't go out in the corridor. Little details like that. And if they're missing, they start to add up in your head, right? And as I scan a set of plans, if I do this, I do plan checks for other customers, right? When they've had an architect design it, they call me in sometimes to do a plan check. It's peer review, same in engineering, right?
Yep.
Not a structural engineer on earth who's put up a high rise in Manhattan that didn't have another engineer look at it for peer
Smart.
review. Right. So peer review is and though when I'm doing that, those are the things I look for. I look for these little, it's not, did they get the benching right? Or, is the wall thickness right? Those are other details that I can look at. But the front of house, like, do they have an office for the lead grower? Did they do, so GMP is a big deal today. So good manufacturing practices, for those who don't know what GMP means, or CGMP, current good manufacturing practices. New Jersey, absolute must. New York, absolute must. Connecticut, absolute requirements in the law that you have to conform with GMP. Well, gee, what does that mean? Do you have sinks in your gowning room so that you can wash your hands before you go out onto the floor? Do you have room for the equipment to put on your booties and to put on the latex gloves, the PPE, the personal protection equipment? These are all little telltales that say this facility is going to work or it's not going to work. Record storage. People, they're looking for canopy square feet. They didn't have any physical room in which they can store the SOPs. And you're never going to pass your yearly inspections if you can't produce those records, right? So there's these details that are buried deep in the law that if you don't read through the entire regulation, you'll miss them. And yeah, if a if a hydroponics store salesperson designs your facility, you're going to see it's got a lot of canopy area, but probably not much of anything else.
I tend to call that space utilization, but everything you just described, I 100% agree with. And I've never talked to a grower who complained they had too much space to work in, right? Whether it's the irrigation room, right? Or whether it's a hallway, or whether it's storage or the staging area, or even the grow room. I mean, a lot of people, container farms are, definitely interesting and a curiosity, and there have been some some successful container farm companies and installations, but not as many as you would think. And one of the big reasons for that is that people don't have space to work and they're uncomfortable in there. And so, like you were saying earlier, like the turnover in a container farm, of people who are working in that space is enormous, because you can't have more than one person working in there comfortably. And the one person who has 3 feet of space to fit their body in and slide in sideways, and try to reach for plants and pull out racks that are, 4 feet wide, but you have a 3-foot aisle. That's an impossibility. And so, yeah, when I look at plans, and if I see, 8-foot corridors, I'm like, yes, like you're going to be able to put your rolling carts in that space and still have people walk by.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. I work a lot with Mike Zartarian, Mike, and we come up with a term called a farm unit. So if you look at a plan of an operation that has thousands of square feet, right? And you get these long corridors, and you get, 9 grow rooms on 10 grow rooms on a quarter, then another quarter with 10 grow rooms. Yeah, there's going to be a veg room interspersed in there, right? What we kind of worked out and have implemented now very successfully is this idea of a farm unit. It's got if you're growing from clone moms and clones and veg to flower, if that's your operation, there's another, you can design the unit differently if you're growing from tissue culture, is why I preface this. Not everybody grows the same way, so I just want to say that there's different ways to design a farm unit. But if you're growing from whatever your initial hort introduction is, whether it's seeds, germinating seeds, or whether it's bringing in tissue. But if you're going from mom to clone to veg to flower, keeping that as a distinct unit, separate from the next, building multiple mom rooms across the space means less steps in that process. Right? If you've got to walk all the way, 400 feet down the corridor to get your veg plants all the way to the flower room 9 that's down the end of the corridor, that's very inefficient. So farm unit is one thing I also look for. Is there an efficiency? I guess what I'm saying is the efficiency of space being correctly laid out so that the worker, if you think through the process, 67 days, whatever your grow cycle is, right? And then when harvest comes, where's the harvest? And is it near to the green waste, right? So you can get used plant matter to to a secure area well enough on the post-harvest, right? And how does all the post-harvest work? Is it lined up in a sequential manner? Are the rooms next to each other that need to be? Or on the intake, is there a quarantine room next to your shipping, your receiving bag? Prior to COVID, we had 100 different, 3 or 4 different answers on what quarantine meant and what it did. Today, we all kind of remember wiping our groceries or thinking that COVID might stick to cardboard. So in cannabis, a quarantine room should be adjacent and should be a through room from every receiving bag, so that you don't just take infested or infected or, heaven forbid, you take a wood pallet into a grow room. Like, don't ever do that, right? Don't ever take the stuff that is associated with the truck and shipping into your facility, right? So you need these kinds of physical barricades, physical barriers. A lot of this comes from GMP as well, right? Looking at biological contamination, microbiological, chemical, and physical contamination. And what are the transport methods by which those contaminants could enter your flower room? Yeah. And if you minimize those through architecture, right, through doors and walls and proper sequencing, then you've built a robust place. So that's what I look for if I look at plans.
I love how much you think about flow and directionality and connectivity and adjacency, right? I mean, all of that is so important in terms of risk management, in terms of even operational efficiency. I mean, it's interesting how if you're trying to manage risk, a lot of times that helps with managing labor efficiency. And if you do things to manage labor efficiency, a lot of times that helps with risk management, right? Like they go hand in hand so frequently. I mean, very rarely are they in conflict with each other.
I don't know if you and I haven't spent a lot of time talking about greenhouses, but one of them blew my head open was the application of sort of Dutch style mobile racking, where the bench moves to the employee
Oh
does not
yeah.
use the bench. And in large scale greenhouse, great guy that I work with, Tom Halfley, I toured a facility that he's done, and we've designed now a couple of facilities using this method. From a CapEx, OpEx, this is a massive capital expenditure, but it reduces your operational expenses massively. So it's basically robotics, right? And moving mobile benching. And I'm looking at it in New York for rural farmers who do not have access to hundreds of people to come and work. There's just not access to that skilled labor set. Then an investment in equipment can be a benefit. So growing in a sealed greenhouse, right, with mechanical systems controlling your interior environments and a mechanical benching system that moves the plant around the facility, reducing the labor count, is where I see the future of production at
Yeah.
greenhouse
Yeah.
level.
Move plants to the people as opposed to people to the plants.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Load in on one end and harvest on the other end. I mean,
And your
it's, yeah.
and your space utilization shoots up to 80 to 85%. So if you think about like building less greenhouse per canopy area, your highest ratio is going to be in automated benching, right? If you're growing in raised beds, right, where nothing moves, right? A
Right.
raised bed greenhouse is maybe 50% efficient. 50% of that, think of a high tunnel or a hoop house. The canopy inside is usually a raised bed or planted right in the ground,
Yeah.
and you're barely at 50% of the area, but you can get up to 85% utilization when you go with the automated benching system.
Yeah.
So there's real massive efficiencies.
So, okay, so we talked about operational efficiency. What do you think about in terms of resource efficiency, and not labor as a resource, but energy and water? Where do you think are some of the biggest opportunities, or even materials? I mean, I'm hearing a lot more from my architect friends about decarbonization and building materials.
Sure.
Is that going to come to cannabis?
That's a lot. I don't know
I
why.
just asked a lot of questions.
Uh, I'll start with an easy one because it bridges to the last conversation, which is
Okay.
operational. I wish indoor growers would absolutely do a 12-hour on, 12-hour off, alternating cycles if they have 2 grow rooms, because you will reduce your energy load by half. You do not have to have your lights on in both rooms for the same photo period. You can alternate them. So if you've got 8 rooms, you do 4 and 4, alternate 12-hour cycles. It will decrease your energy consumption by half.
Not to mention your power demand by
And
half,
power demand.
which
And
will
power.
reduce your energy bill.
That's all of that, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. There's a hot debate between, DX and chilled water in terms of how, efficiency and tunability, right? So energy efficiency, air tightness, right? You want to have tight control over your interior grow environment. And this goes to really like a hawk supervising with the contractor the subtrades, so they don't drill oversized holes to run conduit through and then they don't fill them back in. Amazing stories in there where you're losing energy efficiency through invisible holes in your room and you can't get anything tuned because you can't keep the air pressure correct. So you asked about building materials. Well, that's what I think of when I think of building materials. I'm thinking about plant health, right? I'm not just thinking about, so if I, as an architect, didn't put any kind of foam in a building for the rest of my life, I'd be happy, because foam is all petrochemical, non-renewable, right? And every insulated metal panel is filled with foam, right? So I'm not doing the planet a great service by consuming more petrochemical foam filled products, right? That doesn't make me happy, right? But I'm not gonna start using wood again, because that ain't gonna work for my customer.
Right.
So I'm compartmentalizing, and I'm saying what's good for the project, what's good for the plant. Um, and then energy, we just wrote a white paper. This Mike, who I mentioned, Mike Zotera and Jim Megerson and I wrote a white paper for the state of Illinois talking about the differences of mechanical systems, because they wrote into their law that people should be using. So that's
The
weird.
wrong system. Let's
Wrong
just say
system.
that.
So Molly Graham at MEEA is going to be pushing that into the legislature at the state of
Good.
Illinois.
Thank
We
you.
got that news. Thank Molly and the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. Real happy about that. That's getting pushed up to the legislative level. What else? So energy efficiency, resource efficiency, yeah, building tightness. The envelope, it's not just a rain jacket that goes over your head. It actually also needs to be airtight and rodent tight and insect tight, right? And all of those things to keep all of those predators and bad things out. Um, from my friends who do GMP, good manufacturing practices, that starts at the curb cut. It doesn't just start at the extraction room. So you need to think about, keeping standing water off of your property, because it breeds mosquitoes. You need to think about, where do you place the dumpster relative to the intake door? Is the wind, where's the prevailing winds? Are they blowing flies and out of your dumpster right back into your facility when you open up the loading
Oh
door?
God.
Right? Because you don't
Yeah.
have one of those food safe skirts that comes out and grabs the back of the truck. So as soon as you open up that door, just, junk
Yep.
starts flowing into your facility. That's real. And that junk, those insects, that dust, that pollen, the spray from the soybean farmer next door is just going to migrate right into your facility if you don't have a proper design. And if you didn't think about that when choosing which side of the building to put your loading bay on. So
Good call.
yeah, there's environmentally, there's a lot of ways to look at a grow facility from as an architect. There's a lot of different angles.
What are your thoughts on air pressurization and positive versus negative pressure rooms?
This goes back to my time in medical device manufacturing. So cascading airflows in ISO 7, ISO 8 clean rooms. A lot of jargon there, but so positive air pressure means pushing more air into the room through a filtered outdoor air system to create positive. So, and this is also GMP. This is a GMP standard. So cascading airflows, cascading like water cascades down, air can cascade just like water, and it from a high pressure down to a neutral pressure, down to a negative pressure. And so I present as for my customers many times at the planning board. And I'm their line of defense between the pitchforks and torches of the neighbors saying, this is going to smell. Okay. And I walk them through what cascading airflows means in the space. I walk them through how a recirculating HVAC does not dump air into the night sky. It's not going to dump air onto your 4th of July barbecue. It is not. All that air cascades down, and we have one point of exhaust through the building, because we have a building management system. We have one exhaust system, and we have a 3-part carbon and what is the third part? Carbon filtration. Help me out, Nadia. You're the mechanical designer. What's a 3-part filter for exiting air? One of them is perfume, right? There's this aerosol.
You can do an aerosol spray.
So
Yep.
you can do a carbon
We
filter.
Right. Some people are using ozonation, UV, or ionization to break up those VOCs as they're exiting the building.
Right.
Yep. And then carbon filters. And yeah, I mean, I think what you described is exactly the type of design that we like to see and that we design, is that cascading flow. And And just like you said, if we've done everything else right and we've sealed this building, we've sealed these grow rooms, then pushing air into the grow room, and that is what we would consider the clean room.
That's right.
Right. And so we're giving it that filtered air from the outside, pressurizing it, is that we shouldn't be pushing air out of that room and into the ambient environment and community, because we've sealed that room and that building. So now the air gets to go into another part of the
It goes
building.
where we want it to go, right? It goes where we
Exactly.
want it to go. And then ultimately, we know that we can't just keep pressurizing the building. It would blow up like a balloon. So
Right.
we
We
design,
extract it from one
we
point.
extract it. And
Yep.
as we extract it, we can tell the neighbors, and we can tell the planning board director, and we can tell those pitchforks and torches that we're doing our due diligence to protect their 4th of July barbecue. We're not going to be just dumping. I mean, I like the smell, but not everybody apparently does,
Right.
right?
Well,
So
if
we
they're at a
think
4th of July barbecue, probably one of
they
their
should be
neighbors
high.
or friends is probably smoking a
They should be
joint
high.
anyway.
That's what I try to tell people.
That's the smell they're smelling.
That's when the planning board starts to chuckle and laugh. Oh, okay, I see where you're coming from.
On a kind of a different topic, not so lighthearted. I mean, we were talking ahead of this how the industry has slowed down in the last 6 months or so, maybe 9 months. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on maybe why you think that's happening, or more importantly, the why that's happening. I think we know a lot of the why that's happening, but what are kind of your hopes for this downtime? Right? Like, what do you think is going to emerge on the other side of this downtime, or hoping will emerge?
So, I saw it yesterday on the MJ Biz Daily. They pushed out this article that said, gee, could talking to your customers prove a good business for cannabis industry? Holy
Shocker.
crap. Yeah. I think that the cannabis industry will become a consumer products goods industry. It is
Mm,
already a consumer products goods industry. So what could we be doing? What could developers and entrepreneurs be doing? Polling their customers. What do you want? Poll your customers. That will help to refine the why we're in this industry. Figure out your why. Figure out
yeah.
why are you growing cannabis? What does your customer want? Are you growing it because it's cool, because this is the weed you want to smoke? Or is this the weed that the soccer moms who are going to be buying from you, or you know, the 60 to 85-year-old crowd are really consuming? Is it the
Yeah.
same why? I think I think a lot of that kind of soul searching, and then zeroing in on doing one thing. What I saw pre-COVID from 2014 on, even up through 21, was people just getting into the market as big as they could be, or as generic as they could be, without focusing on the thing that they really did well. Do one thing well. I think vertical integration is great if you have the financing to do it, if you've got the money to do it. But if you don't have the money to be a fully vertically integrated group, do one thing well. Take a smaller bite at the apple. Don't try to do 100,000 square feet of anything. Do 20,000 square feet is great, or 10,000 square feet is awesome, because you can be more consistent and more reliable and bring exactly that thing to market. Look at the examples of Oregon and Washington, right? Look at the price drop that happened in 2018. We just went through the same thing. I say we here in Massachusetts. Massachusetts went through an astronomically dramatic drop in the market, and people are pulling out now. Trulieve is abandoning very large facility that they just built out in Holyoke, Massachusetts, walking away from it.
Is it because the
Take,
market's not there,
yes.
or there's not enough retail stores, but the demand is there? Like, what's happening? Massachusetts is a big state,
We're 6.75 million people, but
but
Florida's got
with a lot of schools, and there's a lot of students who want to smoke
a lot of
weed, right?
students, a lot of students, and yet Florida's got 29 million people. Is that right? 29 million? Or that's California?
We're 35
You're
million.
35. So 20,
Yeah.
25 to 29 million is Florida, right? And there's a lot of geriatrics who smoke weed. And all the parents of those college kids in Massachusetts, they're all down in Florida in the winter. And so I think they're retrenching, regrouping, and focusing on that future market.
Hmm.
Probably smart business. What the dramatic drop in price here, I think, and this slowdown of this past 6 to 9 months, you're accurate in that, is that people should just retrench and look at what happened in similar markets. Look at that Washington, Oregon market. If you can do a small thing, do it well, and do it consistently, you'll make money. There's still going to be people who will pay premium dollar for really, really good, well-grown, consistent cannabis, and for making products that fill a specific need. I consume based mostly on medical stuff. Sleep and aches and pains, and there's some great products out there. There's some wonderful formulators who are formulating just phenomenal blends of THC, CBD, CBDG, multiple cannabinoids, and really putting those into formulations. And again, consumer product goods. Find out what your customer really wants, focus on it, and deliver that. I think you can do that in a small, cost-effective, and profitable way.
Where does that come from, Brian? Focusing on the consumer or the customer, is that something that you help owner operators work through, or are there other consultants that help them work through that, or is it usually self-driven?
I try to have that conversation early because that's where programming. My interest in that is fundamentally because every facility should be custom designed. There isn't a generic facility design. And the custom goes to what is it? What's your why? Customer
Yeah.
A coming to for a new facility design, hiring, Dr. Greenhouse and hiring Anderson Porter Design. What is your why? Why are you growing? Is this the right strain to do that? Is this the right grow environment to do that? Should we, how do we tune and how do we perfectly fit your facility to do that thing? And that's been hard to do in the past since I've been at this since 2014 because people don't know. They simply do not know. And they're coming to this business opportunistically. And they're saying, just do what you did the last time. Didn't you do this before? Isn't that why I hired you? You've done this before. Just do what you did the last time.
Yeah.
Frustrating. That's a frustrating position to be in. I want the customer to take ownership of their role. Why are they doing this? Is it just to make money? Okay, then yes, I can do better than the last time I did it, right? I'm going to do continuous improvement. I'm going to use even better facility. Does it meet your needs? Well, you didn't give me any needs, so we're just going to make it a kick-ass facility. But if you can come to me with a specific, so in Mississippi, I love this story. Southern Crop, we just did a ribbon cutting of 81,000 square feet in Mississippi. Only 3 million people in Mississippi, and yet they have the highest opioid addiction per capita in the United States. And what is it? Pain medication is what presents. The doctors have opioids to give to that. Now, Southern Crop is building a gel cap production manufacturing facility within their cultivation license as well. And they're bringing pain medications to the physicians groups in Mississippi to prescribe for pain. So it literally is an off ramp for opioids. Right? That is a why that I can get behind, right? And they're pulling down 100 grams a square foot where we designed this for, 50 to 60 was the pro forma. They're pulling down 100 grams per square foot on 2 tiers in an indoor grow facility. And I'm real proud of that because it's mission driven and it's got a real ethical purpose to it.
I love that. We grew up on the idea of cannabis. Well, at the time it was, pot, weed was a gateway drug, right, to bigger and badder drugs. But I love flipping the script on that and saying that cannabis is an off-ramp to opioids, to those bigger, badder drugs. This is how we get off that. That's beautiful. That's how we need to be thinking about this plant. I love that. What advice do you have for other architects who are maybe just getting into this industry or interested in getting into cannabis facility design? Because you can't do it all. We can't do it all. It's always fun to talk to other design professionals who understand the challenges and the intricacies about designing what we design. So what advice do you have for other architects and designers?
The more the better, and lean forward, lean into this industry. I had to learn to say we to get involved in this industry, right? I lost a 30-year banking relationship with my,
Really?
when my income exceeded 70% of my revenue was in cannabis.
Yeah.
My bank of 30 years cut us off, said you got 30 days to exit our bank. So and my customers experience the same thing, right? This is and I'm a service provider. I don't touch the plant.
Right.
So I guess I'm pointing to an example that says you need to identify, your customer needs to identify with you. You need to identify with the customer. Get involved in your customer's industry. I say this to architects. Get involved in the industry that your customer is involved in. You can't stay on the outside and be aloof and deign to work with them. You can't just, oh, okay, I'll help you design. That is not a winning attitude. The customer wants to know that you're passionate about what they're passionate about. The customer wants to know that you know the difference between sensible and latent loads. That's something that architects should know. But in most disciplines, in most verticals of industry, architects don't need to know that. They just don't. It never
Right.
comes up. You can pass that off to the engineer, pass off the liability. You don't care, you don't know, don't ask, don't tell, whatever. Get involved in your customer's industry. Really get to know. Go to the expos, or how I did it, going to cannabis expos. Dip your toe in the water of that big bad world. Get to know your brethren. Really, break bread with them, smoke weed with them. Get to know your customers. Because if you don't, and you don't have a passion for it, it'll show. It'll show. You'll be another Chad practicing in the weed world, and you won't get the respect from the legacy folks that are really driving. They're the core and the heart of this business, right? Whether you're just legacy straight up, or whether you're medical, part of the caregiving community, right? Mary Jane Rathburn, baking brownies for for AIDS patients in San Francisco. Whatever your connection to the plant, architect needs to figure that out, because this is a plant-driven industry. It's not I don't want to say design-driven industry, but design in the way architects think of design. Architects think of design as being published in magazines. Architects think of design as using a new material in a unique way. There's very few cannabis operators who care whether you've used a material in a unique way. It doesn't help their business. So understand the customer's business is what I tell. And I think that's true for engineers, right? You need to know what's driving your, you can specify any kind of system, but I tell people this all the time. I said, look, if you're Pfizer or Moderna, two fairly recognizable names now post-COVID, and you're going to build a new facility, you're not going to choose some shitty ass building on the outskirts of Trenton to do it. That's not where, and there's a lot of big pharma in New Jersey. I'm not dishing on New Jersey here. I'm just saying, whatever the neighborhood, whatever you're doing, this is a drug manufacturing industry. We are in consumer products goods, yes, but it's also a drug manufacturing. It's pharma level, and we should be designing materials, designing systems, and flows that work for that, for that purpose.
Okay, so last question, Brian. What do plants crave from architecture?
Consistency.
Nice.
Temperature consistency, airflow consistency. And I learned this from growers. I learned this from hort process engineers. I learned this from engineers. Consistency. So same thing every day. Same thing every day. They don't want it different. They don't want wild temperature swings. They don't want wild pressure swings. They want consistency. And Durs Peterson, you must know Durs now at PIP.
Yeah.
Put up this great slide a couple of years ago. Genetics plus environment equals phenotype. And I'm an architect.
It's true.
That environment is my responsibility. And that's half of the equation of what growers are trying to do, is to present the phenotype, that the purple haze or the particular flower that their customer wants. And so half of that equation is the environment. And so a happy plant craves a consistent, reliable environment that's exactly the same every time. Your customer wants the same thing. They want to go to the store and get the same flower every week, every day, if to make the customer happy. But whatever the limit is, they want this. They don't want to come back to the store and say, "Oh, we don't have it this week." So don't build odd number. Well, that's not the right thing to say. Don't build different size grow rooms. Build every grow room exactly the same size for consistency. I don't know the right answer. Should they be even numbered or odd numbered? There's different math. There's different math involved in that. And that's Hort process engineering. But build it consistently so the plant is happy.
Love it. Love it. So I have at the end a few rapid fire questions for you. They're meant to be quick responses. If you want to elaborate, you can. So I've got a few here for you. You ready?
Go for it. Let's go.
All right. Are plants high tech or low tech?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Do you want me to elaborate?
If you want to.
Well, I mean, they're billions of years old, right? So that's fairly low tech. That's evolutionarily pretty low tech. They're fundamentally trees, oak trees in my backyard are pretty low tech. But when you're growing them in an enclosed environment, whether it's mixed light or warehouse, the environment is very high tech to keep them going. So yeah, the plant itself, it's pretty low tech.
Got it. What is one piece of advice you'd give to a new grower?
Read.
I like it. What has cannabis taught you?
Passion.
Awesome. What has controlled environment horticulture taught you? It's
gotten me more involved as an architect holistically in what I do. Meaning, like I told you, if designing office buildings, I don't have to talk about sensible and latent loads. Like I can just forget about that. The engineer is responsible. There's probably not much impact. There's one of those vents above me and there's one of those vents above me. That one supplies the air, that one returns it. As long as I got those two vents, it's the engineer's problem whether the customer's happy, right? And that was boring to me. That was absolutely boring to me. Cannabis has gotten me much more involved holistically in my career, thinking about what the engineer does. And to the extent that some engineers like, Brian, you're more like an engineer than like an architect. Well, I take that as pride because most architects delay the production schedule because they're fussing over some detail that they don't like, that probably doesn't matter to the owner. I can throw my own profession out of the bus. I went to art school and I went to, graduate degree, and we were taught to speak in a different language, right? Not purposefully, but implicitly, right? That language would be unique amongst architects, and that would build some sort of uniqueness of why we were uniquely qualified to do what we do. I have changed that language entirely. I don't even almost know how to speak that other language, because now I speak the language of latent and sensible loads and airflow and air tightness. And I really enjoy it. I really enjoy, we have plenty of opportunity, and I'm going on. I gave you some really short answers. Because in retail, I get to exercise those and flex those design muscles. And that's a lot of fun.
Okay.
Retail is brand driven. And that's why we do retail, because we're architects and we love that. We love the human-centric lighting and specialty lighting and graphics and cool and pop and sparkle. It's a lot of fun. So we like retail. That's why we do retail.
One of the reasons I'm grinning from ear to ear, I know our listeners can't see it, but I love that you said people have told you that you think more like an engineer than an architect, because I've had people tell me that I should have been an architect because I think like an architect. So no wonder we get along so well.
Exactly.
Okay. Indica or sativa?
Sativa.
Tea, lager, or donut?
Wow. Lager.
All right. I had to ask you a Boston question.
Lager.
That's the right answer right there. Well, it's probably about time for you to go have some lager. So anyway, thank you so much, Brian. That's the end of my questions. It was really fun to talk to you and geek out over architecture and building design, really.
Phenomenal. Loved it. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Yeah, you too. All right. Thanks, Brian.